Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. All my episodes are special. So, welcome to another episode of Chatting with the Experts TV show, where I speak with women from Africa and the Caribbean and in the diaspora. These women are professionals and successful businesswomen. And our mission is to inspire women globally, to educate women, and to empower women globally. I sometimes have men as guests on the show, but most of the time I have these awesome women. So today, our topic is very interesting. Whose shoes are you wearing? Uncovering the woman you really want to be. And with me to do this would be Julian Kiganda, which is Uganda with a K. I'll tell you a bit about her. She's a transformational brand strategist. She's an award-winning designer, author, and speaker who specializes in building transformational brands for purpose-driven clients, ranging from Fortune 500 corporations to multi-million-dollar nonprofits and small businesses. Some of her clients have included the Steve Harvey World Group, the National Urban League, and, oh my gosh, the African Union. She's been featured on the Washington Post, NPR. Oh my God, I could say so much about her. But why don't I ask her to just join us, and then we can talk more about all the places and the lives that she's touched. And with that, let's welcome Julian Kiganda to the show.
It is a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for having me, Paula.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when I read your bio, I was like, oh, she's been rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous.
I've been fortunate to work with some amazing people over the course of my career.
Oh my, I'm sure you have. And the thing is, as you work with them, you're learning from them and they're learning from you too. Isn't that an amazing thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why I really focus on working with purpose-driven clients because, when you're walking in your purpose, it's like almost everything you do really needs to be focused on that. So I'm always learning, always learning.
I know. My mantra is I learn something new every day. And it could be
Yes.
from a baby and it could be from a 67-year-old person. We're all
hmm
young.
So
So,
true.
yeah. All right.
So true.
So, whose shoes are you wearing? Uncovering the woman you want to be. That's a book, the title of a book that you co-authored with your sister, you said.
It is, yeah.
Tell me more.
Tell you more. Well, let me show you as I tell you. So this is the cover of our book.
Oh,
And I
wow.
know that you mentioned that you really focus on interviewing women of the Caribbean, of Africa, the diaspora. So, from my last name, some people can tell I'm not American, so to speak. I was actually born in Uganda.
Mm.
And this book, and you can see the cover, we're very proudly wearing African prints on the cover. My sister Christine and I, we wrote this book. It's actually been 10 years already since we wrote that book. But we wrote the book because when we're looking at all of the self-help professional development books out there on the market, we couldn't find anything that spoke to us both from a cultural and a Christian perspective.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you also coming from parents of Africa and the Caribbean, you can relate to the fact that our experience is just different. It's very
Yes.
different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the thing that we found interesting about the book when it came out was although we really wrote it from an African perspective, just about every culture was touched by this book and can relate to it. We had Asian women reaching out to us and saying, my gosh, like you're speaking my story. We had Latino women, I mean, you name it, Africa, the Caribbean, all over, and African American too. So it really was very universal.
Oh, wow. So that's on my bucket list. I need to get, when I say bucket
Mhm.
list, really and literally, I need to get this book. A lot of my guests have been authors, and I take pride in buying their books and having,
Mm.
and finding some time to read it. Do you have an audio copy of it yet?
We recorded it. We just haven't published it yet. But the print book is actually available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and most places where books are sold. But at some point, yes, you reminded us we do need to publish the audio version.
All right, because obviously, I'll be one of the first ones to buy that because I love
Okay. Well, now it's on my list of things to do in the next few months.
Yeah, so when you and I spoke, we mentioned that one thing you want to talk about is what happens one day when you wake up and realize the things that you thought you'd healed from in the past, actually making an uncomfortable reappearance in your life.
Mm.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah. These past, I would say particularly the past 2.5, 3 years have been quite the journey. When we wrote the book, Whose Shoes Are You Wearing? That was 2010. So I was 4 years post-divorce. And I actually wrote about my divorce in the book because, again, even as I was going through my divorce, it was very hard for me to find resources to show me, okay, what have other people done to get through this? Like, how do people recover from this? Because I think unless you've been through it, you don't really understand that a divorce is like grieving a death. And so you go through all of the emotions and the processing of just everything and the end of something and hopefully the beginning of something better, if you do the work. That was one of the reasons that I wrote about it in the book was because I hadn't really seen people who talked about it and what it was like. When you get married, you don't get married to get divorced. Most people don't.
Yeah.
So I think I had felt that, okay, man, I've been through the worst of it. Like the divorce was, I never want to go through that again. And it was just, it's trauma, for a lot of people, it's trauma. And at the time, my daughter was 9 months old, when we were going through the divorce. So
Yes,
it
that's
was
tough.
Oh, it was tough. It was tough in a lot of ways, but for so many reasons, and I would say she was a major reason why I said, you know what, I can't afford to become bitter from this. I have to become better. So I made sure I did the work. I worked with coaches, I worked with counselors, I worked on myself. I mean, I really did the work. And in the process of doing that work, there were certain things that I understood. Oh, okay, well, this is why this happened the way it did. And I also had to take accountability because, I truly understand now that even if other people have done you wrong, unless you take accountability for your own role in certain situations, because we allow certain things, you can be the kindest person in the world, but I am learning more and more the importance of setting boundaries. And so many times we do not set those boundaries. And I think even culturally, I recognize that that's not something we're really taught.
So right. I
Mm,
was just thinking when you said that boundaries, I had to learn that too. It's not something we are taught. It's
yeah.
rude almost to set those
Yes.
boundaries.
Yes. And unfortunately, I think it works to our detriment as we get older, So it's something many of us have to learn as adults. And because you're not setting those boundaries, people are able to take advantage of you and do certain things. And, whether or not you're aware of that, once you start really going on this healing journey and you start doing the work to learn about yourself and even uncover like, what is it in you that attracted this into your life? Or what is it that allowed this certain situation to actually manifest in your life? Like once you really start paying attention, then it's like, oh, okay. I feel like that's when God is like, okay, we have something to work with here. Because until you take accountability and ownership over certain things, you're going to remain stuck and it's going to be like living on a hamster wheel.
You are absolutely right about taking ownership of like, I
Yeah,
also could have done better. What could I
exactly.
grow from having gone through this?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think I felt that after having gone through that, I was like, okay, I've done the work. I wrote the book. It helped so many people. The interesting thing about the book was, again, we wrote it from our perspective as African women growing up in America, because I was born in Uganda. My sister, who I co-authored the book with, was actually born here, but it didn't matter. Like we were raised in an African household. So
Once you got home, right?
That was it. You know the story. You know the story.
Yes.
Like, I don't care what your friends out there are doing.
In this house.
In this house. My gosh. I didn't appreciate that growing up for sure. But now in hindsight, I'm like, there's so many things I appreciate about our parents actually, in some ways, forcing us to appreciate our culture.
Yes. And
I
to be
mean,
proud.
now, exactly. Now we have Wakanda and Afro beats, but we didn't have that back then. You never wanted to admit you were from Africa back in those days.
Mhm.
So it took work, and so you do the work and things improve. And honestly, like I just feel like when I went through my divorce, I felt like that was actually the beginning of me. I was no longer identifying myself by who I was married to, who I was connected to, who I was in a relationship with. And what I've come to also recognize is, I don't know how to put this in a way that I'm not even going to be politically correct with this. So, East African men, I've found that many of them want women who are very, demure and subservient and, just, yes, honey, yeah, and I had a really hard time with that because that's not me by nature.
Mhm.
That is not be my nature. And I found that when I was in my marriage, I had to dim my light. I had to become less than who I was created to be in order to be acceptable in my marriage.
Mhm.
So once I went through my divorce, that was an opportunity for me to really discover, like, who am I and what do I want? And how am I going to redefine myself in this new chapter in my life? So that was, my gosh, such a time of transformation and growth for me in my life. But again, I had to be willing to do the work, and part of doing the work, which so many of us are afraid of, is actually feeling the pain, you know.
To ask you that. Getting real, right? With
Oof,
yourself.
oof. That part, that part. In fact, there's a chapter in the book called Keeping It, it's actually the very first chapter, Keeping It Real, Removing the Weave, the Lashes, and the Heels. Because we put on these masks in our lives because, again, we're afraid not just to be who we really are, but in allowing ourselves to be who we really are, like what is it that we're going to really feel that we may be avoiding by putting on this mask, you know? And that was a big part of what I had to do in that time and space is I had to take off the mask and everything that, in our community, people were shocked when they found out we were getting a divorce because we looked like the perfect couple and, all these things. But, when I got real, I realized everything happens for a reason, but honestly, we probably never should have gotten married. We probably made better friends than we did husband and wife. But again, it was one of those things where culturally, he fits all of the things, he checked off all the boxes, that
Okay.
African parents are looking for. you
Right.
know.
Right family.
Yes,
Good job.
yes, yes,
Making enough
yes.
money.
Yep, yep, all the things.
Mm.
And I think when I got a chance to keep it real, like that was actually when I was able to allow myself to feel the pain. These days they have something called, I think it's a fairly new term, they have something called spiritual bypassing.
Haven't heard that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me add that to my, you
It's
said, I said I'd learn something new every day. This is the one for today. Spiritual bypassing.
spiritual bypassing. So basically, that's when instead of actually going through something and feeling the pain and doing the work to heal from it, you just pray it away, you sing it away. It's all spiritual. And, it's just another form of avoiding dealing with the pain. And I knew instinctively, and this is where I'm grateful because I feel like I grew up in a very prayerful family. And so I feel like I've always had a good relationship with my creator. And so I instinctively knew, I divinely knew that if I did that, it wasn't called spiritual bypassing at the time, but basically just avoiding dealing with it and then ending up in the same place. I instinctively knew if I did that, that was then going to pass on to my daughter.
Mm.
And that it's one of those things, it's kind of like, if you have an infection and instead of actually going into the infection and cleaning it out and putting a hydrogen peroxide and putting the ointment on and, but you got to go in the wound to clean it. There's some people who don't even go into, they just put a Band-Aid on it and the infection gets worse, So I instinctively knew that that would not work in my favor. And so in that moment, I did the best that I could with what I knew. And I actually think I did really well because it was in that time that, I mean, my business just grew exponentially after that. And I think it was because I got really clear. Like I said, I took the time to really work on me and I got really clear about what I wanted as an individual without being connected to somebody else or, looking at, what do they want from me or what am I supposed to look like if I'm married to them? And is this going to make them look good? That it was no longer about that. It was about, okay, what do I really want? And how am I going to use these gifts that I've been given? They say to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
And, the next few years after that, my gosh, it was such an amazing time in my life.
What I'm hearing from you is that you got rid of the external identifiers and looked into yourself, knew who you were created to be, as you said, created by God, your creator, your gifts, your purpose, and you ran with that to who you are.
Yes, today.
I
ran with it and things were great for a while.
But for a while. So something changed.
For a while. Well, I think the older you get, the more you recognize this is that your life is in cycles. Life happens in cycles, I've heard it said, and I think this is true, that you're either just coming out of something, you're about to go through something, or you're going through it.
So true.
And so in those moments when you're not going through it, things are great. Like things are moving. My business grew. My daughter was doing amazing. I had a very robust just life, social life. I, took initiative and really got involved in my community and just had some incredible experiences because of that. And then I think what happens is, it's kind of like I like to compare it to being in school, right? So when you're in school, like you go through primary, secondary, get your associates, some people, bachelor's. So every one of those grades and every one of those, times in your life, it requires different tests. And in order to graduate, the tests get harder. In order to graduate to the next level, the tests become more difficult.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I realized. I was like, okay, I clearly must have mastered that, chapter in my life.
Yeah.
Exactly, that level. And it was like, okay, God was like, okay,
next
time,
one.
Yep. For the next one. Like you got too comfortable, you can't get too comfortable. And if you do, something is going to happen to shift in your life so that you now have to shift. And to get through certain things, you have to become a different version of yourself. And I believe you always have a choice. You can either choose to, stay comfortable in the pain of being uncomfortable, or you can choose to say, you know what? Okay, this is painful. I'm going to sit here with it, but I'm not going to stay here.
Yes, that's a big one. I'm not going to stay here, but I can sit in it.
Yes.
Learn from it. Take deep breaths. Say, yeah. You mentioned something about energy vampires.
Oh, my gosh. So that was part of my graduating to the next level. That's what I realized. And I honestly just realized that very recently when I was just taking an analysis of all the different cycles I've been through, the different chapters in my life, and looking at, okay, what is it that caused that shift? What do I need to learn so that I don't have to come back here again? And I realized that, although I had healed from a number of things, that one of the things, and again, it goes back to, how you're raised without boundaries. I was a people pleaser. For a lot of immigrant families, your parents, it's all about the grades, it's all about accomplishment, it's all about, all those things. And so in order, and again, I don't blame my parents. Like, this is what they knew, this is what they were taught. And they just wanted the best for us. But a lot of the approval from your parents often comes from how well you're doing in school. And so if
Yes.
you're doing well, then you get all the
Excellent
accolades.
child.
Yes, yes, yes.
And the other thing I was telling my son, or one of my children recently, that remember, we came from environments where we didn't have as many resources. So we are
Mm-hmm.
coming here to better ourselves, and we are saying, "Eh,
Yes,
these children can get this that I didn't have, and
yes,
that,
yes.
we didn't get it, so they can."
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing you always want. Most parents want better for their children.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big part of where the people pleasing came from, just growing up culturally where no was not an acceptable answer for pretty much anything.
Except for the
Um,
bad things.
except,
No to the, but everything
yeah,
else, no
yeah.
wasn't a sentence. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh, not at all. Not at all. And so you grow up like that, and subconsciously you become a people pleaser, but that people pleasing and not wanting people to be upset with you, it transfers into your relationships, personal and professional. So you allow certain things because you're afraid of offending somebody.
yes.
And I realized it's like, my goodness, I let so many people into my life and I allowed them to stay there, even if they made me uncomfortable. I allowed them to stay there because by nature, I'm an empath. And so, empaths, people who are very empathetic, like you feel people's pain,
Mm.
and you often, until you learn better, you often put other people's feelings ahead of your own, which is why it's so hard to have boundaries because you're so concerned about them and how they're going to feel. And, if what you say is going to hurt them, if saying no is going to hurt them, even though it makes you uncomfortable, like you're so concerned about that, that you put your own well being on the line. And I realized that my goodness, I have done that for quite some time in all types of relationships, personal and professional. And so when that happened, somehow, some way, it's like they have GPS signals, right? These energy vampires, they will find you. They will find you, they will target you, and they will suck everything they can out of you until you realize, oh no, enough is enough. Like, I can no longer do this. I have nothing left for myself. And so I think it was around that time when things were going really well, again, people see you doing well and then they attach themselves to you or find ways to attach themselves to you, to your success, to what you're doing. And I'm one of those people, I cheer all people who are doing well. Like, please, like but you start realizing not everybody's like that. Not everyone is like that. There's people who see you and they want to attach themselves to you so they can take from you
Mm.
versus contributing to you.
Yes.
And so, yeah, energy vampires are definitely a thing. They're definitely a thing. And here's the thing, many of them don't start off feeling like energy vampires. Many of them start off feeling like they're very generous people, like they really care about you, like, they're interested, genuinely interested in you and your well-being until they get really comfortable and start seeing that they've gained your trust. And that's when things start shifting, but it's so subtle that you don't even realize what it is because they've already gained so much of your trust and so much of your energy that you start seeing things like gaslighting. And you're like, did that actually happen? Like, you start second guessing yourself. And it gets to the point where you stop following your own instincts. And I think one of the greatest lessons I have learned in this past year, because I've dealt with so much this past year, but it was another major time of growth and transformation for me. One of the greatest lessons I have learned is we have that gut instinct for a reason. And it's so important for us to not necessarily pay attention to what people are saying to us, pay attention to how they make you feel because if you really pay attention to that, usually your first instinct is the right instinct about people.
You are spot on because I was speaking to someone recently, and we're Christians too, where we talked about, the word says, do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you.
Yeah.
But I said, but I have also discovered that You want people to treat you the way you want to be treated, and you have to treat people the way they want to be treated. So I may feel that if someone shouts at me, that means they love me. But if
Mm-hmm.
I shout at somebody else and that's not their understanding of love, they feel I hate them. So it's
Yeah,
understanding, you know?
100%. 100%. And that actually makes me think of the five love languages, you know,
Mhm.
oh gosh, I forgot the author. John Gray, is it? I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think it's John Gray.
Remember.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people have heard of the book. Are you familiar with the five love languages?
Mhm.
Yeah, like that book was life-changing for me because it helps you really understand that the way, to your point, the way you receive love and feel like somebody cares about you may be very different from how somebody else receives love and feel like you care about them. So it just, but again, it goes back to really learning to be still and pay attention to your feelings versus all the stuff that you're hearing because words can be very misleading, but your gut will never lie to you.
Yes, yes. So let's talk also about forgiveness because I know that's a big part of healing, moving forward.
Yes, yeah.
Any time that one has been hurt, you've got to forgive yourself, right?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, forgiving yourself is actually harder than forgiving other people.
You're right, because you're living with you
Yes.
know.
Yes, it really is. And I'll tell you, when it comes to forgiveness, they often say that forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you.
Mhm.
But that is so true because what we don't realize is holding on to stuff, holding on to emotions, your thoughts and your feelings can make you sick.
Yes.
That's where stress comes from. If you're ruminating on things all the time, it's going to make you sick. And so, again, that's one thing that I also recognize like, look, I can't hold on to unforgiveness and bitterness because, again, like, what are you going to attract into your life if that's what you're holding on to? you know so I had to learn to forgive, but I think part of the key to forgiveness is, again, just being really honest about what that person did to you, how it made you feel, and then taking ownership and responsibility for your role in the situation. Because if you were in the situation, you played a role, you know, you definitely played a role, whatever that looks like. And that's specifically speaking to adults because, children, they often don't have a choice in the situations that they're in. So that's a little different. But as adults, we have decisions that we have the free will to make. So what decisions are we making that are putting us in situations like that? So for me, forgiveness was definitely about I don't have room to hold on to this, because if I'm holding on to this, it's like there's no room for goodness in my life, so I have to release that. And I'll say one of my favorite things, and I had to do this actually just a few months ago, one of my favorite exercises on forgiveness is actually two of them. One of them I think I got from my counselor the first time, where you write a letter to the person, you write out everything you want to say to them, everything they did to you, everything you want to get out of your system. And you just write it down, but you never mail it. You can burn it up, you can trash it, whatever it is. But the key is to let it out, because there is therapy. I'm one of those people, I have journals dating back to probably elementary school. Like I have
Ooh,
always written stuff down.
ooh.
Oh yeah. But because it's how I'm able to process things. And I found that when I write things down, there's a release that comes from that because it's no longer in your head. You're no longer really ruminating and holding it up here, but you're actually getting it out. Even writing the book was very therapeutic because, again, you're getting these things out of your head, out of your system, out of your heart, so you no longer have to hold on to them and think about them as hard. But then, a lot of times the people who you're looking to forgive, they don't even know they need to be forgiven.
That's so true. You are busy, every time you see them, your blood pressure goes up,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they're innocent. I mean, not they're innocent, they may not be innocent, but
Right.
they're unaware,
They're unaware. They're completely ignorant, living their own life. And so
right?
that's why, writing the letter doesn't mean you have to send it, right? It's for you to release that so you can move on. So that's one exercise that has helped me. And sometimes that letter may need to be to yourself. which is actually something I'm working with a yoga therapist now who is amazing. And that's actually something she recommended that I do. She's like, you've done that for other people. You might need to do that for yourself. And so that's one exercise. The second one for on forgiveness is actually getting like post-it notes and writing down everybody you need to forgive for whatever you need to forgive them about. So I forgive so and so for doing this to me. I forgive so and so for doing that. I forgive so and so for not doing, whatever that is. Write it all down. And then take all those pieces of paper, put them in the fireplace, find somewhere, safe place, please, where you can burn them up and release it and turn it into your own ritual of forgiveness. And there's something about taking action, like doing some kind of activity to release certain things that it actually becomes more real to you. So that's what I'd recommend because, again, when you're holding on to something, I'm telling you, unforgiveness, anger, bitterness, all those things will make you sick. There are people who are still ruminating over things that happened to them 5, 10 years ago, and they've stopped living. And the people who, done whatever, they're moving on with their lives. So you're the one suffering.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, we could talk forever.
Mm,
I can't believe that 30 minutes has gone by so quickly.
I know.
Oh, it's always when you're having the best conversations that you have the time limits. But one last thing to talk about before we let other people who have joined ask questions other than me. How can you rebuild after loss to create a new version of yourself? Give us like 2 tips, and then we can
Mm.
open up the floor to others to ask.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I have learned, because it's, my goodness, I've lost count of the funerals that I've attended in the past 2 years. So it's definitely been one of those times for me.
Sorry.
I think the biggest thing has been realizing that healing requires every aspect of yourself. And what I mean by that is therapy alone is not enough. I am a huge proponent of therapy, but therapy alone is not enough because we are spiritual beings, we're emotional, we're physical, we're psychological, we're mental. So you really have to address all those aspects of yourself if you're really trying to heal fully. So for me, what I realized I had to do was go beyond just the therapy to look at what are other things I can do that will actually allow me to heal. So that's everything from meditation to becoming a very proud plant mom. Like plants are actually very therapeutic.
They are,
Oh my goodness.
yes.
I
Hmm.
love my plants. I talk to them every day. They all have names. But really, dance, for many of us, dance, we may not realize that dance is also for movement is therapeutic because it releases all of these things from your body and being really intentional about it. So, what I learned was in order for me to truly heal and find joy in my life again, I had to address every aspect of myself. And I actually wrote an ebook about it called Rediscovering Joy, which if people are interested, they can find it at rediscoveringjoyguide.com. It's a free download.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a good point to end on because that's something I've been telling a lot of people. Choose joy. Let us choose
Yes.
joy. You can choose sadness, you can choose, there's so many things to choose, but why not just choose joy?
It's a choice.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
So because we're going to open up the floor for other people who have joined to ask you questions other than moi, how can people find you online if they're listening to this afterwards?
So you can find me everywhere. My personal social media is Julian B. Kiganda at Julian B. Kiganda. I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn and Instagram are probably my most active platforms. I'm on Facebook too, but LinkedIn, Instagram would be better to find me. And then in terms of the work that I do, so I actually created a platform called Emerge Live. And that is to support women who are going through their own mental health and wellness challenges. And it's something that I'm very committed to just because I went through a very close mental breakdown this year. It was rough. And I realized I'm grateful because I have the support system and the tools that I needed, but so many don't. So I created that platform. We're always posting content. We have products that help women just support them along their journey of healing. So you can also find more information on that at Emerge Live EXP on all social media platforms.
Awesome. And for those of you who are listening in, not part of the audience, I want you to know that just as Julian became a guest, so can you. You can reach out to me on my website, which is chattingwiththeexperts.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Paula Okone. I'm on Instagram, and my handle there is at chat_experts_podcast. And I am on Facebook. And I'm really working hard to be more on Facebook because I tend to do LinkedIn and IG before I do Facebook.
Yeah.
Don't judge me now, but that's it. And so thank you again, Julian, for being such a phenomenal guest and
Thank you
chatting
for having
with the
me.
experts. Thank you. And we'll open up the floor for more questions. Thank you.